death and dying. These are topics that a lot of people don't want to talk about. You know, can be something that can be scary for some people, and other people, they're like, you know, whatever, it's just all about dying, right? Today, we're going to be talking to an expert who has been in hospice and understands the process of going through the very end. Whether you're a caregiver or you're a person who is in that stage right now, you definitely want to pay attention to this episode. I forgot to turn off the loop.
Okay. A little loop is
a great way to start.
I
just love that song anyway. I could just play it all day long.
It is.
Hey, everybody. My name is Lynda Sunshine West. I'm the founder at Action Takers Publishing. One of our missions is to empower 5 million women and men to share their stories with the world to make a greater impact on the planet. I have with us one of our authors, Abigail D'Agostino, and she just published this book. Let me put it up on the screen here. Everybody's doing it, so let's die better. This is a 31-day companion for caregivers who are facing the final chapter with their loved ones. So again, if you are a caregiver, you're here today, this is definitely an episode you want to listen to, because we're going to be talking about that process of dying, but how to live with a loved one, you know, who is dying, and taking care of them in a way that is respectful, that is not as scary as it might otherwise be. So we're really here to help you through this situation here. So I want to have Abigail introduce yourself, let everybody know who you are and what you're all about.
Hi, Lynda. Thank you so much for the intro. And I was, from day one of meeting you, I was so excited to work with you. So it's just been an awesome ride.
Thank you.
And so we've had the pleasure of working together. And as a nurse, I worked in the medical field for 20 years, 15 of those being in hospice and palliative care. And I learned so much. And because I learned so much, I wanted to put something together to help other people when they're faced with this time of life with their loved ones, because I couldn't have learned this in school. So many lessons I learned, I couldn't have learned them in school. I learned them through my work. So I'm really happy to be here with you today.
That's awesome. Did you get started when you were like 3 or something? I mean, 20 years. Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
So I came out of school from high school, and I knew I wanted to be a nurse. I just always knew I always loved science, and I loved people. So I went right into nursing school 4 years and graduated, and then went right into working in oncology for about a little more than a year. And then I did a few years in intensive care unit, which was amazing. And again, very pertinent to death and dying. And my education that went right before I went into hospice and palliative care. So all of it was really good stuff. And I use all of the things I learned from all of those years when I wrote this book.
Now, when you were in school, in nursing school, did they talk about death and dying? Did they talk about hospice, or was this kind of like something that just kind of passed through, or did you guys not even hear about it?
We did hear about it. Hospice wasn't so popular back then. And even when I went into hospice, it just wasn't so popular, because medical professionals even just had so much trouble referring patients onto hospice in a timely fashion. But back then, it wasn't so popular. You know, we'd had a home health rotation, and only, I think, a couple of us did hospice in that, or had maybe one day in hospice. So, and this is something, you know, the death thing happens to, all the sick people with whom we worked. So, it's kind of a big deal. So
that's awesome.
Kind of an important thing to cover.
Yeah. So for those watching right now who don't know what hospice is, can you kind of put it like in layman's terms so they can understand?
Yeah, sure. Hospice care is medical care. It's professional medical care, by all those medical professionals, including more, for the person who's dying and at the end of their life. And people may be a little confused and think, oh, so that's just maybe like the last day of life. No, it's up It goes up to about 6 months, the last 6 months of life. So, and in those 6 months, you can do so much to really make a big difference, not just in those last moments at the end of life, but, leading up to it. So this is why it's really important to understand hospice. And, we go through, in the book, I go through a type of care that it's often confused with palliative care. Sometimes those are used interchangeably. So yeah, there's a lot to cover there.
Yeah, I know it's a big topic. When my mother was, it was her last week of life, and we didn't know it at the time, of course, but they came in and started talking to us about hospice, and I was like, "What is that?" I was 50 something, and I had never even heard of hospice before. So I think it's interesting because all those times my mom was going back and forth to the hospital, the last 3 years of her life were spent a lot in the hospital, and my husband and I took her a lot. They never once talked to us about the end. They never once even mentioned it. Like said, there might be a time that we might want to look at hospice with you. And so I find it interesting that the medical professionals didn't even bring it up. So is this to me is a problem. This is a problem. If you're a medical professional, bring it up.
You're so spot on. You said it so well. And not only did this happen when I was working the ICU, but even still, in those 15 years in hospice and palliative care, and even now, still today, it's either they wait till the last minute or it's just not a big topic to cover necessarily. Now, nowadays, it's a little bit more popular because Medicare, the insurance companies have realized that it keeps people out of the hospital more and more.
Oh.
So especially people who are really sick, reimbursement, as we know, drives medical care, medical delivery of care. So in a way, that's actually been a big plus because these people who are really sick are starting to at least get referred a little bit earlier to things like palliative care and to care like palliative care and hospice, which is very good. But yes, in general, it's still referred, these types of care and these programs are still referred a little bit too late, usually.
Yeah, I know when, again, when my mom was going through it, what it was explained to me, and please correct me if my understanding is wrong, is that hospice is about dying comfortably, like keeping the patient, like we know you're going to die. And so we're going to do what we can as a hospice care. Our hospice nurse was amazing. She was only with us for 24 hours because my mom passed within 24 hours. But she was there, just like all she cared about is making sure my mom was comfortable.
That's a huge part. Dying comfortably is huge. And just to add on top of that, the big thing about hospice is it's patient-driven care. So, and I don't know if this is kind of typically, I don't think it's necessarily typically discussed. I think when we're in the medical system, either if it's with a loved one or, because of ourselves and we're dealing with a medical issue, usually the medical system tends to kind of drive our care, meaning the doctor will come in, refer you to the specialist, tell you what meds you need to take, tell you what tests you need to do, all that kind of stuff. In hospice, the care plan is specifically centered on what the patient wants. Or, and if the patient can't, verbalize this and is not able to communicate, their caregiver, which is what we, refer to as caregivers, their loved one, their caregivers will tell us what they want. And so that care is really driven by the patient. So anything we do, what we recommend, medications, other alternative types of treatments, like acupressure, aromatherapy, things like that, everything is driven by what the patient wants, because that is what it has to be. And that's actually spelled out in the Medicare guidelines under hospice care. It's patient-centered care, patient-driven care. And the other thing is it's very holistic. So it's not just caring for the physical part of the patient, not just their physical comfort, but their emotional comfort, their emotional or physical or spiritual distress, and taking care of all those, and their unit of care. The unit of care are these caregivers around them, blood relative or not, people who are involved in their care, involved in their life. So it's a whole shebang of stuff that you get when you get hospice. And it is extremely holistic, which is what makes it so valuable, just outside of the physical comfort. But the physical comfort is huge. It's a huge component. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I guess we weren't in it long enough, fortunately,
No.
24 hours, to
Mhm.
experience all of that, of course. How does somebody know? I'm going to switch gears a little bit to the
Sure.
caregiver, because we
Mhm.
really want to talk about the caregiver. Like I said, my husband and I, we took care of my mom for 3 years, her last 3 years,
Mhm.
and we were her caregivers. And so let's talk about how do you, like, I'm assuming there's varying ranges of caregiving.
Mhm.
And so let's touch on that a little bit and talk about whatever the most important thing is that you think for the caregivers to know.
Yeah, definitely. That's so important to go over. And if it's okay with you, if I just in this book, what I refer to as a caregiver is just that person who has a loved one who is either sick and or getting sicker and or nearing their end of life. So, for my generation, it's, for example, it's my parents, it's my aunt and uncle, potentially a spouse later on, things like that. So these are our loved ones, any loved one it can be. And it doesn't have to be a blood relative or anybody, but you can be a caregiver at any point in your life at whatever degree. You can be a distant caregiver on the other side of the country. You can be a caregiver that is in the thick of it, living at home with a loved one who's dying. So those are what I, consider caregivers that kind of clumped into that whole group. And what, in terms of hospice, how to know when they're ready for hospice, because this is your question, correct? Just want to make sure I answer your question.
No, just wondering, like, what the caregiver, like, what's the most important thing for that caregiver, whatever you think that is. I didn't want to, like, direct the question anywhere.
Okay. Do you mean to know about hospice or to kind of start to know when about hospice? I'm sorry if I didn't understand your
Yeah,
question.
do both. Just do both.
Okay, sure. No problem. We can cover all of that. So for the caregiver, because this can be a tough one, but there are just a few things that I'll just go over. One of the biggest indicators that hospice, it may be time for hospice or to start at least looking into it, is that treatments stop working. They stop giving you the benefit of whatever it is that you're expecting. So maybe you're expecting mom to get up and walk again, for example. And after her chemo treatments, her blood transfusion, after her endo, whatever it is that they're doing, all these little medical things. And you expect her to get up and walk again and still live at home by herself. And that's not working. And, more and more she's needing more care, more treatments, more attention, more visits, all those things. And also, she's not bouncing back to where she was before. In medical terms, we have this term called a baseline, which basically says, that's the point of reference that we use. So can the person return to their baseline where they were before they had this incident, this illness, injury, whatever it is? And most likely, no. So if they can't return to their baseline and they keep getting worse and worse and worse, then it's time to just start thinking about hospice. And even in the meantime, you can do things like palliative care. I'm not going to talk about palliative care right now because I don't want to get the confusion in here yet. But that's a big indicator of when to possibly explore hospice, or at least, really start to, work it into an advanced care plan for the future. The other thing is, things like other kind of physical indicators like losing weight and not eating. Those are huge things because when you really start to lose weight due to a lack of appetite, there are other things in the body that are starting to shut down. And malnutrition is just right around the corner in those cases often, especially when we're talking about somebody who's chronically ill. And then, and lastly, if you're doing kind of a risk to benefit ratio, so you're doing all these tests or treatments, whatever it is, but then mom comes home at the end of the day and she's so exhausted, she stays in bed for the next 3 days. And it really starts to impact her quality of life. So you're really trying to look at what are my benefits of continuing with this curative type of treatment? And how is it impacting the day-to-day, the type of life that my mom would like to live and that quality, and how is it impacting that? So I would just say, again, it really is those, to just recap. So it's that work. I want to be clear, obviously, treatments really stop working and the person keeps getting sicker and sicker as time progresses, even despite all the treatments. The loss of weight and loss of appetite, because that is showing and demonstrating a more serious issue underlying. And then lastly, quality of life is being drastically impacted. And that can be different for everybody, right? It can
Right.
be different for everybody. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So knowing how they are today, or like knowing how they were a month ago, you can kind of
Mm-hmm.
compare and see if there's been any changes. I was just thinking about how, having knowledge about this stuff is really your power. So
Mm-hmm.
when you go out and you do some research, whatever kind of research that is,
Mm-hmm.
having knowledge about it doesn't mean you're giving up. Having knowledge doesn't mean you're quitting. Having knowledge doesn't mean you're saying this is the way it is. It's just about gaining knowledge. And I say that, the flash knowledge of gaining, working with a hospice person 24 hours, and that was all I had, that was probably not the best way to go about it. It would have been nice. It would have been nice for us to be able to make educated decisions, right? So our decisions were based on, she's probably going to be gone in the next week. You guys might want to do hospice. Like, what is that? So we were scrambling, trying to figure out like what it even means, or what it is, and then what it means, how does it impact our house? Like, we had so many questions that we couldn't answer because it was only 24 hours. So really gaining this knowledge is super powerful. What I want to do, Abigail, is I want to switch to the positive sides.
Okay, sure. Yay.
Yeah, let's switch to the positive sides, because not that those were negative or anything, but those were, that was about the understanding and having that knowledge of it. But today, your book, everybody's doing it, so let's die better. I mean, when you first approached me about this book title, I was like, okay, I love this, because we are all doing it. It's like a fact, it was just like, boom, it's a fact, like right out
We're
there
in the same club.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is a very important topic, because we are all going to get there. But the question is, how can we die better? So whether it's the caregiver or it's the person who is dying in their process of dying, what can we do to die better? So what we're going to do is, I'm going to pull up your book. I'm not going to pull it up on the screen. I just have it on my screen here. Okay. But I'm going to jump around to some of the different chapters and have you talk about those particular chapters. So let's talk about the simplifying your mental dashboard. Like, what the heck? How am I going to simplify it? First of all, what is that? And how am I going to simplify it? Right.
So in this whole topic, one of the ways that we do die better, which is why we have this simplifying your dashboard day. I forget what day it is. I think it's day, I don't know. The first 10, one of the first 10 days, I think, is what it is.
It is day 10.
It's day 10. Okay. All right.
You win.
Okay. So the reason why I have this is because in order for us to do this whole thing better, the whole dying part, and prepare for it, we do have to learn new stuff. And nowadays, learning new things, learning new concepts, and trying to work that in and figure out all of that in our heads can seem like a lot. It's quite overwhelming. So in this day in particular, I really talk about how we simplify our mental dashboard. When you are a caregiver and you're working with these other medical professionals about your loved one who is ill, getting worse, and or dying, they're going to be covering a lot of things with you. And even in this book, it's going to be covering a lot of things with you, but they're going to be teaching you how to do a dressing change. They're going to talk to you about when to give your loved one a medication, all that kind of stuff. And in this day in particular, I talk about a method that really worked when I was in practice, especially in hospice and palliative care, when I'd go to a patient's home and talk with their loved one, their caregivers, and it's called the teach back method. And basically, we would go over what we were going over, and I would then sit down with the caregiver, and I'd say, this is to make sure that I was really clear and efficient and effective at teaching you how to give your mom these 2 medications in the morning. So what I want to do is make sure that I was clear, and I would have the caregiver teach it back to me, because if you can teach something back, you pretty much know it. And that goes way beyond medication dosing. It can go with doing a dressing change, because when you're the caregiver, especially for a loved one who's at home, even though hospice is involved, there are times where you need to do a dressing change on your own. There are times where you need to give them a dose of medication that wasn't necessarily scheduled but needed. And then, you can practice with your medical people who are teaching you all these things, how to actually do it at the time, verbally demonstrate it, whatever it is that works for you. And then I give a couple other extra tips in the book, some mortar morsels to kind of help out, tailor it a little bit more to you. But this is a really good concept, and it's been very effective. It came out of someone who is an expert in dementia, Teepa Snow. And I believe, and so we learned that teach back method, and we use that a lot in our hospice and palliative care. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's awesome. And I think it's important for us to realize that at the beginning, it can be very uncomfortable,
Yeah.
changing, addressing for your loved one, like especially parent, like with my mom, she had cancer her last 3 years. She had her bladder removed. And so because of that, she had an ostomy bag on the outside. And I was the lucky one who got to change it. So, to see my mom in that vulnerable state first, because she was the one who was always in charge of everything. And suddenly now I'm taking care of my mom. So to move, like mentally speaking, because you're talking about that mental dashboard, mentally speaking for me, I had to move into this place of realizing that I'm no longer the little girl, the daughter, like that, is that I'm actually taking care of mom. And so I saw things that I didn't want to see, but it was part of the process. We were able to laugh about it and stuff. So that's, I think, was really important, is with my mom, she had a really great sense of humor. And so like, I'm getting emotional just thinking about her right now, but she had a really great sense of humor. And she was able to see the humor in what we were going through, so it was kind of, not that it was fun, but actually that was probably the closest bonding time I ever had with my mom was those last 3 years of her life when I was caretaking for her, Yeah.
Oh, that's such a huge shift though, to make it from being a daughter to being the main caregiver, right? Because she was in that spot for you for most of your life, in that role, however, particularly for you, because your mother was the main caregiver at whatever degree, for most of your life. And now the script is flipped, and now you are that main caregiver, or one of the main caregivers for her. So this is why it's so paramount that we not only normalize the discussions, but the education about death and dying early on, because these things are going to happen. And there's another day that I also talk about how it's important to do rehearse these things, these changes that come up, because we really want to get our nervous systems a little bit more accustomed, or just familiarize our nervous systems with these things that come up, to normalize the fact that they're always going to feel most likely uncomfortable to a degree. But if the more and more you can learn about this stuff, normalize the education and conversations about death and dying, and then expose your nervous system to these possible things that could happen, these possible scenarios that could happen, then it's still going to seem a little bit much when it happens, but it won't seem so much as it would if you hadn't done that preparation.
Yeah, that's I think that's really important for all of us to understand with anything in life, because as we do more of it, it becomes more familiar. As it becomes more familiar, it's easier to deal with. And so, not to say that it's going to be easy. That's not what I'm saying. But there are things in life, like, for example, when I broke through a fear every single day for a year, it was really hard at the beginning of the year. But as I got into, day 200, it was easier. Day 365, like, oh, that's just fear, whatever. It just became part of my life. And so that's the same thing here. When you practice something, practice doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. It just means you're practicing so that you're, it's what it's called, not the emotions as much as the physiological, whatever is going on within us physiologically, it will be easier because our body has already experienced it. So kind of like role playing,
Definitely. That's why I think one of the days is is a practice for the mock final test that's coming. So this is where I talk about how we can go about doing this in as a caregiver, for a loved one who is declining or dying soon. So yes, so important and so needed. Yeah.
Okay, so let's switch again. Do you have any funny stories you want to share with us? I know you're in the book, you change names. We're not using real names, but do you have any funny stories you want to share with us? They could be in the book or not in the book, either way.
And I don't know if it was fun. I don't know if it's really that funny. I'm trying to think of the funny ones, but it's not this story did not make it to the book, even though I really thought it was. And it's not really funny, but it's a story that always stayed with me. And some people
Okay.
think it's a little funny part of it because it's about a patient that I had when I was a newer hospice nurse. And for some reason, this is just, she will always stay with me. I'll just call her, Mary for now. And so when I met Mary, I remember walking in the room and she had her hair done and her lipstick. I just remember her lipstick. Her lipstick was this certain color that just really stood out in her face. And every time I saw her afterwards, she always had the lipstick on. And even though she was feeling terrible, even though days that she couldn't get out of bed, she still had it on. I remember when I came to visit her because I got a call that she had a change in condition. She was getting close to dying, probably in the next 24 hours. I walk into the room. The first thing I thought was, oh my gosh, I got to put Mary's lipstick on. I mean, even though, I had so many other things, I mean, as a nurse, you get it, and I'm sure as a physician, all these other, professionals, that when you're in your field, you get used to, when you walk into a room, you automatically go through these things. That's part of your assessment. So I know I already had that down from being in the hospital and being in hospice, even though I was a newer hospice nurse, but it was so important for her to have that lipstick on because she told me I got to have my lipstick on all the time. The first thing I did, ran up, I sanitized my hands, and I put that lipstick on, and I felt like, okay, now I can take care of Mary and do the rest of the stuff I need to do because we got the lipstick back on. And I made sure, that night I said, we have to make sure lipstick by the bed. She's got to have it on at all times because that was so important to her. And I know that wasn't necessarily the funniest of stories, but it was one of my favorite stories.
What I love about that is that brings to light that how important it is for us as caregivers to honor what the person who is dying wants. So somebody looking at that might say, well, she doesn't need a lipstick. I mean, she's not going anywhere, but that's not the point. The point is that for her, that made her feel something, right? To have that lipstick on, and you paid attention to that. So that's awesome that you did. Maybe everybody wouldn't have paid attention to that. So I was thinking about those kinds of things. Like again, with my sister was funny. My sister was a really funny person. So when she was dying, we had, again, it was 24 hours of hospice with my sister.
Oh.
And it was just very sudden. And just that last 24 hours, we were cracking up, until maybe the last 3 or 4 hours. And she was just a funny person. She always wanted to joke. And so we weren't sitting there all somber and everything. Like we were all laughing. She was laughing. And so really, I think paying attention to what they want is the most important thing. Would you say your opinion that's accurate?
Yeah. And it's different for everybody. And there are ways to that in the book we cover on another day, how to determine that. And it's remembering the person, not just the body that's dying or the person that's dying. It's a person who has also been living and who is still living, even though through their this end of life process, they're at the end of their life. It's still remembering and honoring that person, however way they want to be honored. In hospice, and I do have, actually, there is a funny story that I do mention in the book now that I am thinking more. But, we've had all these different sorts of patients that, as a person in hospice and palliative care, you kind of assume, before you really kind of have been in the field for a while, you always kind of assume that somebody wants just their people around their bed, being quiet, playing some yoga, spa music, something like that. And I got to meet patients who were like, no, if you put that music on, that is just not going to work for him. He needs his Led Zeppelin. He had certain Beatles songs, whatever it was they had to play. And the other funny story, do we have time for a funny story or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the other funny story is this patient I won't forget. So it was a staff member, every week we met with our whole medical group, physicians, nursing aides, nurses, social workers, chaplains, all those people. And we always honor the people, our patients who had died. So, and we honor them by sharing whatever it is. One of my staff members shared this story about a woman, Jenny. Of course, these again, names are changed. And she was in her house dying, and her family members were all around her bed and just kind of sharing little anecdotes about her. It was really sweet. They were saying it was just really sweet. And she kept saying the light. And so she said it so many times that everyone started to assume like, oh, she's seeing the light. Like This is a phenomenon that does happen that I also cover on another day, that where they have, they reach and do certain things. But she kept saying the light. And then in some other moment, a few moments after that, she just, even though she couldn't open her eyes and she was very weak, she was able to say, turn the damn light off. She just was so done with the light. She just didn't want that bright light over her. So we're, the caregivers and loved ones and my nurses, they're thinking, oh, she's right here. And everyone's holding hands, talking to her and all that kind of stuff. And she just wanted the light off. She died the next day, but she just wanted that light off. So anyway, that was a funny story. I can't forget. I remember sitting at the table where I was sitting when my nurse told me about that story. So that was fun.
That is funny. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And so my husband, he's 80 and he's been talking to me about death since I've known him for 36 years. And it's interesting because just the other day I said, I need you to record what you want, at the end, because I don't want anybody to claim that I said, this is what you want, because he says, I don't want any kumbaya. I don't want anybody standing over me. I just want you there. I don't want anybody else there. I don't want, if there's any music playing, I want it to be my own, because he's written songs and recorded them. He's like, I just want my own music playing and I want you there and nobody else. So like that, I was like, okay, I got to make sure that somebody doesn't think that I made that up, because that's very drastic from what most people want. He doesn't want the music playing. He doesn't want the last rites. He doesn't want any of that stuff. He just wants to be alone, die peacefully with just me and him and our dog. He wants our dog by his side too.
Yeah. The animals play such a key role. Such a key role.
But knowing that, so that's the thing, is like, because since he's been talking about, he just talks about death. It's something he likes to talk about for some reason. But since he's been talking about it so long, I've become not desensitized to it, but comfortable with it, like comfortable talking about it, like talking with you about it here, or talking about what he wants or what I want in the end. And I think this is a topic that is sort of taboo. It's been taboo for a long time. And do you see it making a surgence into, like, do you see more people
becoming popular?
About it? Yeah. Death is popular.
Being the popular kid. I really don't
Wait,
know.
I got it. Wait, first, for those baby boomers like me, you might not have heard this song, but you may have. Let's talk about death, baby. Let's talk about you.
Yes, for sure. Okay. Oh my gosh. That's brilliant.
For those who don't know, so George Michael, let's talk about sex. Just change it to death.
I love it. Oh my gosh. I love that, Lynda. I really like that. That is,
you should incorporate it into your podcast. She has a podcast, by the way.
Yes, we do have a podcast, and had to have a podcast, and it's also on the YouTube channel. So yes, thank you. I would like to see it become a little bit more normalized, where we have these conversations and education about death and dying. And part of that is just recognizing that it's going to feel weird. It's going to feel uncomfortable. And part of this whole process is to acknowledge that, we're naturally afraid of death. We don't like talking about it. We don't like thinking about it. It's very uncomfortable. We're afraid that we won't know what to say. We're afraid of saying something stupid when we're trying to comfort someone. So sometimes we just avoid that altogether. All that stuff comes. And so, yes, normalizing it is such, normalizing all these things is such an important key part to helping death become a little bit more popular, or at least a little bit more in the mainstream, I guess, of our conversations, because it is, what's so funny is that it is happening to everybody, but yet we're so quick to just dismiss it. And the reason why is, and it makes sense for us, because biologically our brain, controls our body and kind of what's happening. And our brain is designed, it's this super machine to make us survive. So our brain is trying to make us survive. So everything that it does every single day, it's wanting us to survive. So every day we're driven to eat and drink. Every day we're driven to rest. We're driven to procreate, to keep our species going. We're driven that when we are to be afraid of speaking in public, because as animals, biologically, if we were to be rejected, we know that if we were alone, we would die. So this whole thing, our whole makeup is all about surviving. So being afraid of death, being uncomfortable with death is a really natural, normal response. Normal, I know, is kind of, but it's a very, very natural response. So if you feel afraid of death, good, you're healthy. It's a very natural response. Very healthy response. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I say to my
There
husband
are,
all the time, like,
yeah.
I'm not scared of death. I just
Mhm.
don't want it to hurt, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
that's for me. It's just that's the thing. I think that's what hospice
Mhm.
care is all about, is
Mhm.
making sure, it doesn't hurt. Maybe it does hurt, but it's
Mhm.
supposed like to make it so it doesn't hurt as much, maybe. But that's the
Mhm.
only thing for me. I'm not scared of dying because I believe in God. I believe I
Mhm.
know where I'm going. I know where I'm
Yep.
going. And so I'm
Mhm.
actually excited to get there. I just don't
Mhm.
want it to be painful, you
Mhm.
know. Like when I
Yeah.
was in a car accident recently, if I had died on impact, I would have been okay.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
if I was in a lot of pain, fortunately, I was able to walk away. But if I was in a lot of pain, I'm not sure that I would be so happy about that. You know?
No, no, of course not. And again, for everybody it's different. But, it's a very natural response to be fearful and be terrified of death. I have seen cases where people were not, it didn't seem like they were afraid, and these oftentimes were patients who were really tired of being in their bodies. They were just so
Mm,
done with the pain, not just the physical pain, but the emotional pain, maybe the
yeah.
spiritual distress, things like that. And then you have people who are so afraid of dying because they haven't addressed these existential type of parts of them, their spiritual pain, or their emotional ties, whatever it is. So it's so individual. The body does basically the same thing in all different time frames for every single person that's dying, but each experience can be so individual to the person. So, which is why it's so
Yeah.
important to talk about it and learn about it and all that kind of stuff, like we're doing here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's a big topic. It's something that we are all going to experience at
Hmm.
one time, not
Yeah.
one time or another. It's like one time, like there's no do-overs. Well, some
Yeah.
people and some
Some
people
people.
have gone and come back. I mean,
Some people have gone and come back, and those are, yeah, the NDEs and near death experiences, which I do touch on in the book, because those are
yeah.
really interesting. So yeah, those all those things happen. I remember in hospice though, we were taught that we only have one chance to do this right, so we always want to make sure that we're doing the best as possible with our patients and their caregivers. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're so blessed to have, angels on earth. Hospice care nurses are
Hmm.
definitely those angels on earth. And, thanks so much for going into that field. So you can get her the copy of her book. Everybody's doing it. So Let's Die Better. This is a 31-day companion. So you can take it just in small pieces, 2 or 3 pages at a time. And you kind of walks you through it. So if you, think that it's eventually one of your loved ones are going to be going into that place that you're going to be needing to take care of them, this is definitely a great book for you. If you are caregiving for somebody right now, this is definitely a great book for you.
Hmm.
If you yourself are like, I think I'm going to be going through this pretty soon, this is a great book for you. Basically, it's a great book for everybody that is going to experience death, which is all of us. You can go to diebetterbook.com. Again, that's diebetterbook.com. On there, she also has some other things for you to access, as well as her YouTube channel is there,
Hmm.
her podcast, everything you
Hmm.
need in order to connect with Abigail is over there. So what are some final words you have for us, Abigail?
The goal here is for that, so everybody can make the most informed decisions, referencing the life and death of their loved one. Of course, it can cross over into the caregiver, but I really want people to make the most informed decisions. And by doing so, and in doing so, you have to we have to kind of do a little prep work beforehand. And it doesn't have to be, while it may feel daunting, while it may feel overwhelming, we can take it in pieces. We can take it in 31 days. Some days are a little bit longer than others, so I just want to be clear on that, because some days are just a little bit, they're longer
Right.
days, but you can take them in bits and pieces. But yes, this is it's critical in order for you to make the most informed decisions about you or your loved one. We do need to start the education now, and it's better to do this before crisis hits, because when crisis hits, we're emotionally overwhelmed, emotionally dysregulated, all that kind of stuff. So it's better to talk about it now while we're of sound mind, a little bit calmer, and can think through things a little more clearly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that. Like I said, if we had known about this, before my mom's passing, it
Mhm.
would have been a lot easier for us to make a decision about what we were going to do and how we were going to do it, because we would have been educated. So get yourself educated on these topics. Get your copy of the book today, diebetterbook.com, and go check it out. I mean, it's a great book. Go listen to our podcast and get all the goods. Get all the goods. So Abigail, thanks so much again for doing what you do to help people to live a better life while they're dying, and just getting the word out there. Really appreciate you.
Thanks, Lynda. I really appreciate you.
Now, if you have a story to tell, because everybody does, check us out at actiontakerspublishing.com. Let us help you to get your story out into the world where it will make a greater impact on the planet. It's actiontakerspublishing.com. Check it out. Thank you again so much for being here. Truly appreciate you.